I'd like to ask Jeff to come and give me a hard time.
Good morning, everyone. This is going to be our second interview of the day. In the earlier service, I told everyone that Saïd had requested a list of questions from me so that he could prepare, and that I had sent him a list of questions that I had no intention of asking him. So now, look at him. He's sitting confidently thinking that I now know the questions that Jeff is going to ask me because we've already done this once.
You have more, don't you? You're still my friend.
I am.
All
Good,
right.
good. So let's get started. Oh, so everybody knows this interview was my idea. You know, Saïd has done a wonderful job of interviewing dignitaries and church leaders and missionaries and even some of us from the congregation. I felt it was about time we turned the tables. So, shall we?
Go ahead.
Okay. So to warm him up, I'm going to ask you a couple of just
Easy
one
questions?
word. Right.
All right.
Okay. Dogs or cats?
Cat.
Coke or Pepsi?
Am I supposed to answer that?
Yeah.
All right, Coke.
Cubs or socks?
People are going to hate me.
Cubs or socks?
Cup.
Progressive or conservative?
Progressive.
Paul or Jesus?
Jesus.
Very good. Mountains or beach?
Beach.
All right. Are you warmed up?
I'm warmed up. Go
All
for
right.
it.
Okay. What moment in your life made you decide to become a pastor?
I don't know if there was a moment in my life. There was always a sense of wanting to become a pastor. I talked to my friends back home when I was growing up about it. They kind of knew I had that leaning. But I think it all made sense after I had become a pastor. Let's just jump into that. And I was with my mother face to face for the last time. She was going to die a year later, and I wasn't going to see her for that during that year. My grandfather had just died, and we were just talking face to face. My mother hated the fact that I became a Lutheran pastor. She was Catholic. My whole family is Catholic. And so she thought I went the wrong way and joined a cult. So, way back, she said, "You're no longer my son." I knew she didn't mean it, but in any case, that moment she said, "You know what, Saïd? Before you were born, before you were conceived, I prayed to God, and I said, God, if you give me a son, he's all yours," kind of. So, to me at least, that helped me understand the struggles I had, because I was going to medical school. I actually attended medical school for a year, and just wasn't sure where I was going to go until I finally decided to go to seminary. So it was a struggle always to be a pastor, and that helped me understand her prayer.
Her loss, our gain, I guess.
Say that again?
Her loss, our gain.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I think she and my grandfather, neither one of them knew English, but when they attended a service in a congregation I was serving way back in Wisconsin, my grandfather, who was like in his 90s, said, "I knew when you said the Lord's Prayer, and I knew when you said the Creed," which was his way of saying we're all Christian. So, that was a blessing, but it came many years after the fact.
Those gifts often do come long after the fact.
Yeah.
And it's not until, in retrospect, that we see them as gifts.
Mm-hmm.
So you were Catholic and now you were Lutheran. If you were Catholic, if you were Pope, what's the first thing you would do?
I love the present Pope. I'd probably do whatever he did. But I think what I would do is declare that all the followers of Jesus belong to the same church. That Jesus has one church, the body of Christ, which includes all denominations. And I would say, as a pope, I'm going to work really hard to bring people together to realize they belong to the one church of Jesus Christ. And I think the present pope is actually doing that. Yeah.
So what's more important, theology or worship?
Worship.
Worship or community?
Worship.
Worship or the pastor leading the worship?
I'm going to say worship, but I'm also going to go back to community and say Christ-centered community is essential. So it's not the pastor, it's always the community centered in Christ, who's our good shepherd, that makes a difference. I'm going to explore I'm going to go beyond that. Can I? Should I have 2 minutes on that?
You're in charge till September 9th.
So the first congregation I served, you're in charge, so. The first congregation I served was St. Andrew Lutheran Church in Racine, Wisconsin. I was their first associate. I was there for 7.5 years. It was a mission church that was growing, thriving, doing amazing ministry. And that was until the 80s. That congregation just shut down, closed down a few months ago. And there's no longer St. Andrew Lutheran Church. To me, that just tells me something went wrong, and what is it? I think it's because people stopped taking ownership of their role as a community. Pastors come and go. And when we, as a congregation or as a community, stop being Christ-centered, thinking about our mission as being a lot more than ourselves, in that setting, we were in the outskirts of Racine on 4 Mile Road, if any of you know Racine, Wisconsin. And the lot next door was a huge lot where it was still empty at the time, but now it's all built up. That was an area that we were supposed to minister to, and we stopped for a reason. I don't know what it is. I think it's selfish. So the church has to be thinking about, what is God calling us to do to the outsider who is not a member of the Lutheran Church, who doesn't know how to do things as we do, and they have needs that we should meet, and so forth. So anyways, you could see I get animated about that. It's not the pastor, it's the whole community centered in Christ.
So where do you think that God is calling the church, capital C, and where do you think God is calling the church, Grace Church, small c?
Good question. I think we at Grace answered that really well recently. In surveys and discernment process we went through, we said 3 things. We said, and I think that applies to the ELCA or to the church at large, that we should be committed to serving our community and the world. Find out what the needs are and do what we can to serve the community and the world. That was one goal. The second goal we said we should have is grow faithful disciples. And the third goal we said is that we should be good stewards of the resources we have, which in our case it's the building, and making sure, taking care of it so that it continues to be a good tool that God can use to reach people. Let me just elaborate a little bit here. When I first came to Grace, we were about to celebrate our 125th anniversary as a congregation. And I said to myself, I either come here and bring this congregation to die, which would be my fault, or we're going to think about the future. And I asked the congregation, what do you want? And what they said was, we want to reach out and grow and be a thriving congregation, and we want to have more young people here. And God started to bless us with more young people. They also said, we want the whole building to be inviting and welcoming. So for 30 years, we had been saying, we want an elevator. We finally said, we're going to make it happen. We said, this building is not quite as inviting as it should be, so we broke a hole in the back of this church, in the building there. You see now 4 doors, and when you go through those doors, you are in the fellowship hall. So that opens up the whole building on this floor, and then anyone can go to any level in the building, and this whole building is so vibrant and filled with people. The preschool just goes all over the place here. Anytime you come, there are people using this building. So the building is, we decided, is going to be a tool for witnessing and to welcoming people. So those are decisions that the congregation made, and now we're saying we're going to continue that vision. I think so many congregations in our synod are dying. They don't have to die. I know there are reasons for it, but I get animated about it. I get excited. So anyways, I mean, I think I'm grateful for Grace Church and the decisions this congregation is making and has made in the past, because we refuse to be a dead church. We have good news to share with the world, and we know it takes everything. It takes every one of us. It takes what we do in ministry. It takes our outreach, and it takes a building that's inviting and well taken care of.
The church really is nothing more than a fulcrum for that mission, right? It is that place where we come together and get strengthened and go out and do what you just described.
Exactly.
And the decisions that you talked about, opening up to Fellowship Hall and putting an elevator in, seem small, but they are really a physical manifestation of that mission, right? Because they have an impact on how we see ourselves, but also, I think, present a decision-making process as well about what's important and what will we invest our time and treasure in. I like the way you described that.
We had a choir member at the time who could not walk up the stairs but wanted to sing. And he was the first one to give the first $10,000 towards the elevator. Now, he's dead now, but his memory continues to affect all of us, and what he did continues to affect all of us. We had kids on wheelchairs that could not go to Sunday school, and now they can. So, I appreciate the vision that our members had, and it wasn't mine. It was really their vision and their commitment to make it happen.
I want to shift gears.
Okay.
So, as you look out there and you see all these faces of members of Grace, some of them have been here a really long time. Some of them are new in your time here. Some of them came early when you came here. Some of them probably came in the last month or two. To those people who feel that Grace Church is Saïd, and they came here because of you, and they stayed here because of you, and are now thinking of leaving because of you, what would you say to them?
Don't they dare. I'll be back with a whip. No, don't they dare. The church, I know we're all important, and so I must have been important. But the church is a lot more than me. We have amazing staff. We're an amazing leader. Look at all the people that put together Vacation Bible School. I didn't do anything. So there are things that are happening day in, day out that I'm not involved in. So I had the easy job of directing the choir, so to speak. Let's go in this direction because that's what we said we should do. And that's the easy job. The congregation decided where we should go, and they made it happen. So you're going to miss me. I'm going to miss you. But don't you dare leaving. I'll be after you. That's when I come back with a whip.
So it's clear that you've had an incredible impact on Grace in your time here. How has Grace changed you?
Well, it'd be interesting to see what people would say how I changed. I think, to my surprise, I've become more open, more loving, more welcoming of strangers. Grace has helped me be transformed about major issues in the world. For example, gay lesbian issues and being welcoming. Frankly, I'm an old guy belonging to the old ways of thinking and doing, and even though my kids were challenging me on my previous attitude, it's this congregation that talked about it and studied the issue and finally decided we have to be more than just saying we're welcoming, we have to do weddings of gays and lesbians. That's how we show we really are. And you know, that was the congregation's decision, and for me, that helped me change. That would be one example. The whole emphasis on service and outreach. This congregation is amazing in terms of our commitment to always reach out to people. From way back when I came from Global Mission to this congregation, one of my colleagues at the time said, I grew up at Grace, and there was always a globe in each Sunday school room, and we were told we should care about the world, and they did something about it, raising funds, etc., etc. So, you know, this congregation has values that continue to happen today, and whether I'm here or not, I'm sure this congregation will continue to thrive.
Okay. I just have a couple of more questions for you. Because I could sit up here all day and talk to this guy. I don't know if you guys could sit and listen, but I could sit and talk to him all day. Which makes me feel. I have been to so many churches in my lifetime. And not church shopping, just life has taken me many different places, whether that's living or travel or whatever. And I have had some incredible priests, deacons, spiritual directors in my life. But I have to say that hands down, Pastor Saïd is the best pastor I have ever known. I have to shift gears after that. Have you ever doubted your faith?
Many times.
What kept you going?
My conviction, my belief that God is love.
What does that mean?
God so loved the world. I mean, I'm convinced that God loves the world. In Greek is cosmos. So God so loved the world that God became a human being in Jesus. Jesus is the one I follow. And Jesus is loving. Jesus welcomed strangers, cared for people that were oppressed and occupied. Jesus is someone who was willing to die to show us what God is like. So in the midst of suffering, in the midst of occupation, in the midst of the same things we have today, Jesus continued to love, and that's how I see God. God loves us, and God invites us, just like Jesus did, to follow Jesus. That means, and that's where hope comes in. Hope is not believing that things are going to be better, but in the midst of whatever is happening, to trust that God still wants what's good for the world, and to be part of that journey of God in the world. So even though I'm just as confused about so many things that I'm sure many of you are, I'm just convinced I'm important, and so each one is here. So if all of us together unite in saying, God is using me for good, I don't always see what good it is, that's going to make a difference. And by the way, I mean, just to close, I want to say I love you too. And I love this congregation. I love each and every one of you. And it's been a joy and a privilege to be your pastor. You can't imagine how much fun that is. But as you know, my heart is also where I grew up, and in a world that's been troubled by all kinds of movements. 68 million refugees in the world, many of them in the Middle East and in Europe. I get to be part of the church's work in that region. I'll tell you what I'm worried about is actually one thing, and I know I'm rushing here maybe. Just one thing I'm worried about is leaving, and I'm feeling guilty about it, I'm going to stand, leaving Grace at a time when we said we're going to have a vision appeal and continue our movement forward. It's the worst thing to do to a congregation to have a senior pastor leave at that time. And I've been talking to some of you, inviting you to be part of this planning process to make that happen this fall. And I'm not as successful as I'd like to be. And part of it, I know, is your grief of losing your pastor, and it's a time of transition, and do we really want to commit to this? I want you to trust God. I want you to trust that God will take care of Grace as God did for a long, long time, and to be behind this effort of the Vision Appeal, because that effort is your creation based on what you know God. First, to reach out to the community and the world based on our resources. 2, to grow faithful disciples. And 3, to continue to take care of the resources that God has given us, including a building, to make sure that it is used by God for good. That's your vision, and I don't want you to give up on it. That would be the worst thing that could happen if I leave and you don't move forward. So that's my worry. I share it with you because you know I'm always honest with you. So if any of you feel moved to help us move forward, on Tuesday evening, we have our consultant with us to help us move forward. Come over at 7 o'clock, and we'll figure out how we're going to work together on moving this forward. Thank you.
Don't sit down. Don't give me a hug.
Okay. Now what?
We're not going to end on a financial appeal.
Okay. It wasn't a financial appeal. It was a vision appeal.
That's all right, but when you sit in those pews out there, sometimes it feels, it sounds a little bit different, okay? What Saïd just said, I'm going to interpret for him, is all of you out there are the church. He's just part of that church. All of you out there are the Grace community. He's just a part of that community. What he said is, it's up to us to keep this thing going, not Saïd. He's made his contribution of time and treasure to Grace. Now it's our turn to continue.
Let's give him a hand.
So let's give Pastor Saïd a hand.
Thank you.